The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when Admiral Helena Vance stepped onto the speaking platform. Her gray uniform was pressed sharp, and her eyes held the kind of steel that came from watching friends die in the void of space. Around her sat the representatives of 12 alien civilizations, each one convinced that humanity had finally reached the end of its brief story among the stars. The Vornik ambassador spoke first. His scaled face twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind. He said that the Keth Dominion had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. 2,000 warships waited at the edge of human space. The Vornik reminded everyone that humanity possessed only 300 vessels. He asked what madness drove the humans to reject the surrender terms. Helena let the words hang in the air for a moment. She looked at each ambassador in turn. The Silvari delegates whispered among themselves, already writing humanity off as a failed experiment. The mechanical beings from the Nexus Collective calculated odds and found them impossible. Even the Thornery, who had once called humans their brothers in war, shook their massive heads in disappointment. The critics had made their judgment clear. Humanity would fall. The Imperial fleet would burn. Earth would become another conquered world, its people scattered across alien slave markets. This was the mathematical reality that every species in the Council accepted as truth. Helena finally spoke. She told them that humanity appreciated their concern. She said the Imperial fleet would deploy in 48 hours. She promised that when the battle ended, the Council would understand why humans never accepted surrender. The Vornik ambassador laughed. He called humans amusing creatures, brave but foolish. He wished them a quick death, for the Keth showed no mercy to those who resisted. Helena left the chamber without another word. Her shuttle carried her through the crowded orbital stations above the Council world and back to her flagship, the Inn's Defiance. The ship measured 2 kilometers from bow to stern, covered in battle scars from a dozen campaigns. It was old by human standards, built in the early days of expansion when humanity still feared the darkness between stars. Commander Jiang Wei met her at the hangar bay. His face showed the strain of sleepless nights spent preparing for what everyone called an impossible fight. He reported that the fleet had gathered at Rally Point Omega, 300 ships, just as the Vornik had said. Every vessel humanity could spare from defense duties across 100 colony worlds. Helena walked with him through the corridors of the Defiance. Crew members saluted as she passed, their faces showing determination rather than fear. These were the children of Earth, born on distant worlds, but carrying the same fire that had driven their ancestors to cross oceans and conquer mountains. She asked Zhao about the special project. His expression changed slightly, showing the hint of a smile that he quickly suppressed. He confirmed that Project Prometheus was ready. The engineers had worked triple shifts for 6 months. Every ship in the fleet now carried the new systems. Helena nodded. The Council races had spent centuries perfecting their weapons and shields. They fought wars according to ancient doctrines passed down through generations. Their technology was stable, reliable, and entirely predictable. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 80 years ago, dismissed as primitive newcomers who barely understood faster than light travel. What the aliens failed to understand was that humans never stopped changing. While other species refined existing technology, human scientists tore everything apart and rebuilt it from scratch. They asked questions that other races considered answered long ago. They experimented with ideas that older civilizations had abandoned as too dangerous or too unstable. Project Prometheus represented 3 decades of secret research. It started as a theoretical paper written by a young physicist who wondered what would happen if you destabilized a ship's shield harmonics at precisely the right frequency. The answer had terrified the research team at first. Then it excited them beyond measure. The Imperial fleet jumped to the battle coordinates 2 days later. Helena stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the holographic display fill with red markers. The Keth Dominion fleet spread across space like a crimson tide. 2,000 ships, each one bristling with weapons that had conquered 100 worlds. The Keth commander sent a final message. He identified himself as Grand Warlord Dexner, conqueror of the Pellan systems and destroyer of the Manthi civilization. He offered humanity one last chance to surrender. He promised quick deaths for the soldiers and only moderate suffering for the civilians who would serve as slaves. Helena opened a channel to the entire Imperial fleet. She addressed her people simply, calling them sons and daughters of Earth. She acknowledged that the enemy outnumbered them nearly 7-1. She reminded them that human history was filled with moments like this, times when the odds meant nothing against the will to survive. She told them about Marathon, where Greeks stood against an empire. She spoke of Britain standing alone against fascism while the world expected surrender. She mentioned the colonies on Mars declaring independence against Earth's corporate fleets, outnumbered and outgunned but refusing to bow. Helena declared that today they would add a new chapter to that story. Today the critics would learn what humanity truly was. She ordered all ships to activate Prometheus systems and engage the enemy. The battle began with a wall of plasma fire from the Keth fleet. Standard galactic doctrine called for the defenders to raise shields and return fire, slowly wearing down the enemy through attrition. The aliens expected humanity to die bravely but predictably. Instead, the Imperial fleet did something no one had ever seen before. The human ships pulsed with strange energy, their hulls glowing with a blue light that made Keth sensors go haywire. When the plasma bolts struck, they passed through the human vessels as if the ships were ghosts. Grand Warlord Dexner demanded explanations from his science officers. They had none to give. Human ships should not be able to phase through weapons fire. The technology required was considered theoretical at best, impossible at worst. Helena ordered the fleet forward. 300 human ships dove into the heart of the enemy formation, their weapons blazing with concentrated fury. The Prometheus systems worked exactly as designed, shifting the ships into a state that existed partially outside normal space. Enemy weapons could not touch them, but human guns fired just fine. The Keth formation broke apart within the first hour. Ships that had conquered entire civilizations found themselves defenseless against human assault frigates. Battlecruisers that had never known defeat exploded under concentrated fire from enemies they could not harm. Dexner screamed orders that grew increasingly desperate. He commanded his ships to ram the humans, but the ghost vessels slipped through solid matter like water through fingers. He ordered retreat, but the human fleet had already surrounded his command ship. Helena brought the Defiance alongside the enemy flagship. She opened communications and spoke directly to the Keth warlord. She told him that humanity had tried diplomacy. She reminded him that Earth had offered peace and fair trade to every species it encountered. The Keth had responded with threats and demands for surrender. She explained that humans did not surrender. They did not accept conquest. They adapted, invented, and overcame every obstacle the universe placed before them. This was not arrogance but simple historical fact. Dexner asked how this was possible. His voice cracked with something his species rarely experienced. He felt fear, true and absolute, for the first time in his long military career. He wanted to know what kind of creatures could develop technology that the greatest minds in the galaxy considered impossible. Helena answered simply. She told him that humans were the species that looked at the impossible and asked why not. They were the children of a small blue world who had spread across the stars through sheer stubborn refusal to accept limitations. She offered him a choice: surrender unconditionally and live, or continue fighting and watch his entire fleet die. The Keth Dominion had 800 ships remaining. The Imperial fleet had lost exactly 17 vessels, all to accidents and mechanical failures rather than enemy action. Dexner surrendered. His remaining captains followed his example without argument. The battle that everyone expected to end humanity instead ended the Keth Dominion's expansion forever. The Galactic Council received the news with stunned silence. The Vornak ambassador had no witty comments to offer. The Silvari stopped their whispered predictions of human extinction. Even the Nexus Collective struggled to process data that contradicted every model they had built. Helena returned to the council chamber 3 weeks later. This time, she did not stand on the speaking platform as a supplicant. She walked among the delegates as an equal, perhaps something more. Human ambassadors followed behind her, carrying documents that would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. She addressed the council with quiet confidence. She said that humanity came in peace, as they always had. She declared that the Imperial fleet would protect any world that asked for help against aggression. She offered alliance and trade to those who treated humans with respect. But she also delivered a warning. She stated clearly that humanity would never again allow itself to be threatened. Any species that attacked human worlds would face the full power of technologies that continued to evolve at speeds the galaxy could not imagine. She promised that the critics would always underestimate humanity, and humanity would always prove them wrong. The Vornak ambassador rose to speak. His scales had lost their confident sheen. He asked, with genuine curiosity rather than mockery, how humans had accomplished such a victory. He wanted to understand these strange creatures who refused to accept the rules that governed galactic civilization. Helena smiled for the first time since the crisis began. She told him that humans had a saying back on Earth. She said that the experts always knew what was impossible until someone who did not know any better went ahead and did it anyway. The Council approved new treaties that recognized humanity as a major galactic power. Trade agreements followed, then military alliances, then cultural exchanges. Within a generation, human technology had spread to a dozen species who had once dismissed Earth as irrelevant. The Prometheus project was only the beginning. Human scientists continued their relentless drive forward, developing new systems that made the ghost ships look primitive by comparison. Each breakthrough earned new respect from species that had measured their progress in millennia rather than decades. Admiral Helena Vance retired 5 years after the battle that changed everything. She spent her remaining years writing memoirs and teaching at the Imperial Naval Academy. Students came from across human space to learn from the woman who had faced 2,000 enemy ships and smiled. Her final public speech came on the 10th anniversary of the victory. She stood before a crowd of millions, her hair now silver and her body showing its age. But her voice remained strong as she delivered a message that would echo through human history. She told them to never let anyone define their limits. She urged them to never accept that something could not be done simply because others had failed. She reminded them that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or numbers, but the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. The critics would always say that humans could not win. The critics would always be wrong. This was not hope or optimism, but the fundamental truth of the human spirit. As long as one person refused to surrender, humanity would find a way to victory. The Imperial fleet had proven this truth once. Helena knew with absolute certainty that future generations would prove it again and again, against enemies and challenges that the current age could not even imagine. This was the legacy of Earth, carried forward by every son and daughter who looked at the stars and saw not limitations, but infinite possibility.